I'm an artist. And what do artists do? You probably figured it all out. Artists make art. Well, how do artists do that? That's one of the things we're going to talk about here. One of the things that I want to share about that is exactly how artists come to make art. Now, everything that you've heard thus far, it contributes to what I'm going to say here. We talk about being creative, and to be creative, you have to be open, you have to be available, and you have to be willing. Well, this particular piece of art here is called a Border Wars. And I did this piece of artwork, 2011. I hope I'm not telling the tale. But at any rate, I want to share something about how this came to be. Now, as I said, you think, what do artists do? Well, you make art. You get a pencil, you get a paintbrush, you get a chisel, you get a digital camera. A visual artist uses tools like that. Well, that's only, and you make marks and you do something. Well, that's only part of the deal. That's about the latter half of the second half of the creative process. Well, the first part of it is make art, but make art about what? Therein lies the rub. Well, as I was casting about here, and I think about the way I make art is, for me, art is a form of prayer. I happen to be a Christian, so art is one of the ways that I pray. Art is one of the ways that I make the invisible visible. That's what artists really tend to do. Well, the thing that I mentioned before, and several other presenters before me have mentioned about being creative, is one has to be available. You have to be open. And the thing about it is you have to be willing. You have to be willing to be available and willing to be willing, and then willing to go wherever the inspiration will take you. Well, since art is a form of prayer for me, it's a collaborative effort. The Spirit and I, God and I, we work these things out together. I don't always take the lead. Well, sometimes when one prays, if you pray, you'll probably know that sometimes prayer is very meditative and very serene, and other times it's very ecstatic, like my jacket. And then other times, sometimes the prayer is like that. Sometimes the invitation that God gives to me is follow me to this place. Now, it's a bit distorted, but you can see here what this is about. About 3 years ago, I was watching television. I just happened upon a BBC special about the Mexican drug wars. And 60 minutes long, 60 minutes that absolutely have changed my life. When I read this presentation to my sister yesterday, I talked to her over the phone, I read it, and I began to wail and weep and sob as intensely as I did 3 years ago when I first encountered all this information about the drug wars. Well, after that, I was wondering, what in the world could I do? Easy for me to make a piece of art here in the U.S. I don't have to deal with the consequences of cartels fighting over profits. And the profits of the drug trade is lucrative. Drug trade and human trafficking trade is through the roof, 13 billion plus a year. And as far as drugs go, we have that confluence of gun suppliers and decision makers, both sides of the border, and of course the users. There seems to be an insatiable desire for and a demand for drugs, else there would be no business. Well, I figured, what could I do to be in solidarity with people here and in Mexico who have to live in places where this kind of thing is common? I saw in this special, I saw images and subsequent research where people would just throw bodies. I saw bloody, sheet-covered corpses. I saw rooms full of dismembered bodies. They'd cut their limbs off, cut their hands and their feet off, decapitated, and bring the heads to wherever. And here these heads were left, of these human beings, were left in front of the municipal slaughterhouse. So that tells you something. And I figured that the only appropriate thing to do for just about anybody who had any kind of feelings and still had a soul was to just weep. Tear your clothes, get down on your knees, howl like a dog, and pound the ground, which is pretty much what I did. And to be in solidarity with the people of Mexico who are standing up. You know, the innocent people are tired of this. To be in solidarity with them, what could I do? And that's where I said, well, what can I do with the resources that I have available? I'm an artist. I use these hands to make art. And that's what I did. And I looked to see, well, I don't know if this is going to make any difference. Well, I thought about what my lineage is. Picasso, 1937, you've probably seen or heard about this painting. Guernica, here to raise consciousness. This is a howl from his soul, just like this is a howl from my own. I'm in the lineage of Grunewald, when he made the Isenheim altarpiece for the hospital at St. Anthony's Monastery for people who had St. Anthony's fire or Ergo's disease. I'm well within that lineage. So here is the, it's open here. So what I decided to do was go for it. And I let my heart lead me to this. Well, you'll have to decide whether this is going to make any difference or not. Now, I want to read something to you. In a few days, matter of fact, 3 days from now, there's the anniversary of Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail. Now I'm going to read an excerpt to you, and you decide whether this has any confluence with what I'm talking about, whether this has anything to do with this piece, Border Wars. Moreover, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta or East Texas and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham or Mexico or Wisconsin or Livingston, Texas or Kenya or for that matter anywhere else. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. You heard a lot of that. Just about every single person who presented thus far has said some version of the same thing. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. St. Paul also said it. He said, if one member suffers, all suffer together with it. And if one member is honored, all rejoice with it. Now look at this. Now even nowadays, I don't know if there's going to be anybody talking about the science of interrelatedness. I hope so. But even scientists are now beginning to verify what mystics and religious traditions from pretty much, I suppose, time immemorial have already intuited, that everything is held together by something unstoppable, unnameable, unidentifiable. You see here that element X or particle X, and it's all talking about solidarity and entanglement. So what I think and what I do is going to affect you if you're in the far northwest corner of northwest Lapland and you never meet me. Based on that, I had the courage to let my heart, everything, the anguish, the grief, the sadness, and the helplessness, pour forth here in the hopes that it is better to light one candle in the darkness to raise awareness than just to curse apathy and ignorance. Well, I'm going to close with a poem called Path by a poet named Jack Hirschman. He says, go to your broken heart. If you think you don't have one, get one. To get one, be sincere. Learn sincerity by letting life enter because you're helpless really to do otherwise. Even as you try escaping, let it take you and tear you open. Like a sentence inside you've waited for all your life. Let it break your heart. Brokenheartedness is the beginning of all real reception. See the gate opening, your mouth opening like a womb, giving birth to your voice for the first time. There are joys and sorrows in the world and the universe, and each one of them has each one of our names written on them. And each one, our personal joys and sorrows are extensions and contributors to the general sorrows and joys of the whole world. And I think Hirschman was right. Let your heart lead you, move your wounded heart, move you and lead you into action. First of all, like so many people have said, you have to be willing. You have to be available and take courage enough to follow where it leads you. I was not planning on going here. I promise you I was not. And as I made this work of art, this is recycled papers pulled from trash heaps and things that people threw away, like the lives of the people you saw. These are all somebody's kids. And as I was doing this mixed with tears. I cried a lot when I made this, an awful lot when I made this. So what I'm really praying for is that enough of us will take the courage to begin the journeys that we need to go to into the womb. Artists have been dealing with this for centuries. I don't care, irrespective of culture, color, any of that. Take courage to go into our own wombs and the wombs of the world. And believe it or not, you might think I'm nuts, and then I think enough of you here are already doing it, or you wouldn't even be here. That there is joy, and there's peace, and there's freedom in beginning the journey. Now, not to engage in the journey, we have to create distractions. People are going to be, have talked about and probably will be talking about environmental degradation. Well, it's the same thing. We degrade our environment because we strip our world of resources to create distractions, so we don't have to walk in the wombs. That's what the drug traffickers and human traffickers do. They provide the raw materials for us to be able to do that. So one of the things I like to close by saying that if we take the courage to enter whatever wombs and joys have our names on them, the thing that I promise you, you will find this. You will see, you will be a witness to the rivers of living water that will flow out of your own heart into your own life, the lives of other people, and into all creation. And this, my brothers and sisters, is very, very good news. Thank you.